It's Aretha and then Dusty, and I don't think she'd argue with that. She's in the top 5 of female vocals ever, among all the greats.
I don't know what it is that makes me love you so. I only know I never wanna let you go. 'Cause you started something, can't you see? That ever since we met you had a hold on me. It happens to be true. I only wanna be with you.
Dusty has a sound which is absolutely unique, brilliant. Alongside Peggy Lee, Ella Fitzgerald, Nina Simone, Aretha Franklin, it's just a sound that can truly break your heart.
Dusty just had what it takes. I think what it takes is something totally inbuilt. It's some spark in your vocal mechanism, and what skills she had. She was just quite brilliant.
You know, there's a distinctiveness about it. You know it's Dusty right away. And it's a very soulful, and it was delivered from the heart.
The only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Yes, he was.
There was something about her amazing peroxide hair and those dark eyes. There was a sort of slight air of tragedy about her. And I guess it came through in the songs. There was a real pathos and vulnerability.
I can remember quite clearly seeing her on Sunday night at London Palladium. There was just something very thrilling for me about Dusty's voice, and also the way she looked and all the fantastic hand gestures.
What have I? Since you went away, I've been hanging around. I've been wondering why I'm feeling down. Went away, it should make me feel better, but I don't know how I'm gonna get through this.
Everybody would ask me who my favourite singer was, and Dusty was, the first one I would mention. She was so warm and very sweet.
She's a great personality. She's actually, a very good entertainer. Very distinguished career. Beautiful.
You don't have to say you love me, just be close at hand. You don't have to stay forever, I will understand. Believe me.
Music from Dusty and words from Elvis Costello, Vicky Wickham, Andy Peebles, Burt Bacharach, Lucy O'Brien, Neil Tennant, Lulu and Tony Bennett, all of whom will be paying their respects to Dusty Springfield in this program. And they're not the only ones who've been paying tribute to Dusty's almost peerless talent. Last week in New York, her friend Elton John accepted her induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Rolling Stone magazine called her Britain's best ever pop singer. And at her funeral, Lulu called Dusty the originator of girl power. I'm Johnnie Walker, and this is Radio 2's tribute to one of Britain's most enduring and talented pop stars. A star truly deserving of her status. There was nothing Dusty couldn't sing. As it says on the sleeve notes to her album Everything's Coming Up Dusty, Dusty doesn't just sing a song, she lives it. She takes lyrics by the scruff of the neck and shakes them into a shape that spells clear magic. Dusty Springfield was born Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien on April 16, 1939, into an Anglo-Irish family in Hampstead, London. Her mother was a frustrated actress, her father an equally frustrated pianist. The house crackled with suppressed creativity. Biographer Lucy O'Brien.
Her mother was Irish and had ambitions to be an actress and was quite a frustrated housewife and a bit unhappy with living a respectable suburban lifestyle. And her father was an accountant, but actually nursed ambitions to be a pianist.
My father was a terrible pianist, bless his heart, but he taught me an appreciation of classical music. In fact, that's all I listened to till I was about 13.
There was always music around, and she knew she could sing. I mean, there was no doubt about it. And she also knew that there was nothing else she wanted to do. I mean, God forbid she should have been a secretary. She would have been hopeless.
Dusty's best friend and manager, Vicky Wickham. And there wasn't much chance of Dusty conforming to anything.
Dusty was a tomboy when she was younger, and she often played with her brother. So it wouldn't surprise me that Dusty emerged from that time, playing football in the streets and getting dusty.
Thankfully, Dusty didn't want to be a footballer. During her early teens, she'd realised she wanted to be a singer. and more specifically, a blues singer.
From quite an early age, she was really interested in blues singers, and I think that's so interesting for a white suburban Catholic convent girl to be into Bessie Smith at the age of 12. Something was going on there. I remember some school friends talking about her singing St. Louis blues on the Catholic feast day, and all the nuns being really shocked with this. So she knew early on what she wanted to do, and she used to tell people, well, I'm going to be a singer when I grow up.
Very introvert, very shy. And I think that's why she chose to sing, was that it was an outlet and it gave her something that she could shine at and do.
Having left school, Dusty pursued her singing ambitions, playing around the folk clubs with her brother Dion. And in 1957, they got something of a break, a season playing at various Butlins holiday camps. But a more serious opportunity came for Dusty when she was asked to join the Lana Sisters and had the novelty hit 7 Little Girls Sitting on a Back Seat. But it wasn't really what she'd set her heart on, and so she rejoined her brother in a trio along with a friend, Tom Field. Inspired by Tom's surname and the time of year, they became the Springfields. And adopting stage names, Dion and Mary became Tom and Dusty Springfield. The group became popular on the club and folk circuit, and in 1961 signed with Phillips Records. Their first big hit was Island of Dreams, and despite the group's folk and country leanings, Dusty's love of black music shone through.
She always had that voice. When the Springfields sang, she had those inflections, she had the soul in her voice. It was there. In the middle of Island of Dreams, which, let's face it, it's a country song, when it soars off into the bridge, the middle of the song, I mean, she sings it like a dream, and the audiences used to just go up like that when she hit those middle notes. So yeah, she always had soul in her voice.
Island of Dreams, and before that the voice of Mike Hurst, who joined the Springfields when Tim Field had abruptly left to pursue other avenues. The Springfields were fast becoming Britain's biggest pop group.
They had been voted in 1961 by the NME as the top British vocal group. And when I joined, it was a most extraordinary time anyway, because we had heard of the Beatles, and in fact they were at the bottom of the bill on a couple of gigs we played.
As the new boy in the band, and much more outgoing than Dusty's brother Tom, Mike soon found himself Dusty's co-conspirator and comic foil.
She had a wacky sense of humour, Dusty. I mean, she used to call me Neddy. I was Neddy Seagoon, Gunsha. And I'd do Blue Bottle, she'd do Eccles, and I mean, we'd go on forever like this. But then she was really wacky too. I mean, she was sort of Marx Brothers, Three Stooges time, because, I mean, she used to love smashing crockery, was the big thing. I mean, she'd send out the Woolies when we were on tour, and she'd buy sort of 4 sets of the cheapest china, but full sets.
And at a concert with the Lana Sisters, Dusty simply couldn't resist doing a bit of upstaging.
Well, I mean, you can imagine, I mean, it's like daggers drawn anyway. So I'm standing in the wings watching the Lana Sisters, and one of them steps up to the mic and says in that wonderful old, you can only do this in 1962, you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's at this moment that we would like to. And as she started to introduce Scarlet Ribbons, which was one of our songs, which is why Dusty was even more furious, you see, there's a nudge, and I look round and Dusty's standing in the wings with a tray piled with crockery, you see. And she said, nudge me. I said, come on, no. She said, nudge me. I said, go away, you see. And I walked away from her. And as I walked away, up goes the tray in the air, down comes the crockery. Well, the noise, the Lana Sisters look absolutely livid. They know what's happened. And Dusty points at me and says, he pushed me. At which point the stage manager grabs me and throws me out of the stage door. Our manager had to get me back in again before we could do our act. That's Dusty.
In 1962, the Springfields found themselves with a surprise hit in America, and arguably it is they who could be said to have spearheaded the British invasion of the United States almost 2 years before the Beatles.
I don't want your lonely mansion with a tear in every room. All I want's the love you promised beneath the haloed moon. But you think I should be happy with your money and your name, and hide myself in sorrow while you play your cheating game. Silver threads and golden needles cannot mend this heart of mine, and I dare not drown my sorrow in the warm glow of your wine. But you think I should be happy with your money and your name, and hide myself in sorrow while you play your cheating game.
Silver Threads and Golden Needles, which has since been recorded by the likes of Linda Ronstadt, the Everly Brothers, and Billy Joe Spears. And whilst on tour in America with the Springfields, Dusty had one of those life-changing moments in New York.
I remember looking up at the buildings and hearing that coming out of a record store and saying, that's what I want to sound like. And this was with the Springfields. But hearing the power of it, the precision of it, the ballsiness of it, and saying, now I know what I want to do.
I know something about love. Gotta want it bad. If that guy's got into your blood, go out and get him. If you want it to be the very part of you, makes you want to breathe, here's the thing to do. Tell him that you're never gonna leave him. Tell him that you're always gonna love him. Tell him right now.
Tell Him by the Exciters. And just as everything seemed to be going perfectly, Tom suggested it was time the group should break up.
Nobody ever believes this. Absolutely true. Winter Gardens, Blackpool. We were sitting there having a cup of tea, having done a rehearsal for that Sunday night's concert. And it was Tom. Tom says, why don't we break up? And Dusty says, yeah, okay. And they both looked at me. Now, you remember, I'm the new kid on the block. It's been just under 2 years. Like an idiot, you know, I'm only 20. I said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. If only I thought about it more.
So in September 1963, the Springfields made their farewell appearance at the London Palladium. For Dusty to embark on a solo career was a bold move for someone not only very young, but also incredibly shy. But those who were close to her knew she had the talent and the drive to succeed.
Everybody knew. The record company knew, she knew, I knew, Tom knew, we all knew it was going to happen. She carried herself in that way. It's as if it was preordained. She knew.
She's very competitive. So the moment, you say to Dusty, this is your shot, she really takes it to the fullest, and there's no way she's going to do it any less than, 101%.
As Dusty was looking for material to record for a new solo career, she accepted a job for a few weeks hosting the groundbreaking TV pop show Ready, Steady, Go. Good exposure for Dusty, but very hard work.
People wouldn't show up. They wouldn't be there when you announced them. The photography was just diabolical.
That was the sort of cult mod show of the time. Everyone would race home on a Friday to go and see Ready, Steady, Go.
And no sooner had Dusty finished her stint on Ready, Steady, Go than she was back in the charts in her own right. And that first single was the first song ever to be performed on a new TV pop show, Top of the Pops.
It was just obvious from the day I heard it in the studio that it was, one of those songs, hit from the day she recorded it. It's still a hit, and it still sounds great.
Doesn't matter where you go.
And so began a huge run of hit singles and Dusty's irresistible and unstoppable rise to the top. And not only here in Britain. I Only Want to Be With You was also a big hit in the States, and for a British female artist to have a top 10 hit in America was practically unheard of at the time. On her subsequent trip to the United States, Dusty was to form a relationship that would prove to be enduring both in terms of friendship and creativity. The new friends were songwriters Burt Bacharach and Hal David, who between them were changing the concept of what a pop song could be.
Pop songs prior to that were extremely predictable. The thing about Bacharach and David is it didn't do what you expected it to. I'd never heard anything like it before, and that was its charm and its impact.
He loved her voice. He felt in the same way he felt Dionne Warwick's voice fitted their material. He just thought Dusty really was right for the songs, understood them, presented them, interpreted them. I mean, he's potty about her.
I took her to the Grammys in New York just because I think she wanted to meet me. I wanted to meet her. She was my date. I took her to the Grammy dinner. It was sweet, and enjoyed meeting her.
I just don't know what to do with myself. Don't know just what to do with myself. I'm so used to doing everything with you, planning everything for two, and now that we're through, I just don't know what to do with my time. I'm so lonesome for you, it's a crime. Going to a movie only makes me sad. Parties make me feel as bad when I'm not with you. I just don't know what to do. Like a summer rose. Like a summer rose, it needs the sun and rain. I need your sweet love to beat all the pain. I don't know just what to do with myself. I don't know just what to do with myself. Baby, if you knew love ever turns you down, come on back, I will be around, just waiting for you.
Bacharach and David's I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself. As Chris Welch noted in Dusty's obituary in The Independent, she interpreted songs with such force they became definitive versions.
I think once a song's been done well, leave it alone. You know, there are songs that have been done crappily. Those are the ones you redo. But some of the covers that she's done are just absolutely impeccable. But with Dusty, that's the unique thing about her, is that she could do somebody else's song and make you love it and not cringe and say, why did she touch it?
In December 1964, Dusty was invited to tour South Africa. She agreed to play, but only under certain conditions. She would only play to mixed audiences. But facing an all-white audience on her first night in the country, she refused to perform.
They knew that they had to, in the contract, make sure that she played to all races. And when she got there and she went into the theatre, it wasn't, and it very clearly said white only. So Dusty, with, thank God, some moral value, said no. And they did indeed put her in the hotel and would not let her out, and then literally deported her. You know, she says now, was she in a way making a huge stand? No, she was just doing what she thought was morally right. And did she really change anything? Probably not. But again, it was the right thing to do.
But instead of applauding Dusty's stance against apartheid, some of her showbiz peers rounded on her and criticised her for possibly spoiling their chance of working in South Africa. I'm Johnnie Walker, and this is A Girl Called Dusty, Radio 2's tribute to Dusty Springfield, who died earlier this month.
Wishing and hoping and thinking and praying, planning and dreaming each night of his charms that won't get you into his arms. So if you're looking to find love, you can share. All you gotta do is hold him and kiss him and love him and show him that you care. Show him that you care just for him. And do the thing he likes to do. Wear your hair just for him. 'Cause you won't get him thinking and a praying, wishing and a hoping, just wishing and hoping and thinking and praying, planning and dreaming. His kisses will start that won't get you into his heart. So if you're thinking of heartbreak, true love is. All you gotta do is hold him and kiss him and squeeze him and love him. Yeah, just do it. And after you do, you will be his.
Wishing and Hoping, another great Bacharach and David song, which obviously owed a lot to the black soul sound and Dusty's studious listening to the likes of Bessie Smith, Dionne Warwick and groups like the Exciters. Dusty once said, "I have a definite and deep affinity with black musicians. They put more expression and feeling into their music than whites." And often on record, she was mistaken for being a black American, something which thrilled her. But soon though Dusty came to feel she was being misunderstood, and by the very black artists she admired so much, including Dionne Warwick, who also recorded many Bacharach and David songs.
The black singers always knew I was copying, and I got very sort of highly praised, but Dionne had a bit of a vendetta. I mean, I think once they met me and realized that I worshipped them, that helped it along. The only singer that ever took a personal dislike to me, and she was not in great shape at the time, was Nina Simone. The fact that I was a honky was enough.
But what they'd overlooked was that Dusty was somebody who really championed black music, often with an almost evangelical zeal. During her brief time at Ready Steady Go, she campaigned tirelessly to get some of her favorite artists onto the show, something for which Vicky Wickham, then a producer for Ready Steady Go, is forever grateful.
If it hadn't been for Dusty, I would not have known about Motown, Stax, Atlantic, which is why Otis Redding, the Supremes, Wilson Pickett, all the great black artists of the era were on the show. And it really was credit to Dusty.
And in April 1965, Dusty hosted a one-off TV program focusing on a small black music label, then practically unheard of in the UK, Tamla Motown.
The sound of Motown was the first time that the Motown entourage came over. Little Stevie Wonder, Supremes, The Temptations, The Miracles. Again, it would never have happened if Dusty hadn't said to me, you know, you really should do a show.
She was more or less an ambassador for Motown in Britain, when Motown was just this small, unknown label from Detroit. No one knew anything about it.
And to reciprocate, the Motown Review asked Dusty to appear with them at the black music mecca, the Harlem Apollo. Andy Peebles.
Tremendous accolade to her, and hardly surprising to any of us who've been fans of hers for as many years as I have, to find that she was the voice that was invited to be involved. They couldn't have paid her a higher compliment.
So, by the mid-1960s, Dusty was not only a TV and pop star, but she was fast becoming an icon. That peroxide beehive hair, and more particularly the dark panda eye makeup, was universally recognizable. Legend has it that the thick mascara was simply the result of nature more than anything. Dusty was short-sighted and couldn't see what she was doing when putting her makeup on. Her biographer, Lucy O'Brien, however, believes it was more by design and just a little necessity.
She looked in French Vogue when she was quite young and decided on a look which was based on very heavy coal eye-lined eyes that were on the models. Because it was quite difficult to apply it, often she'd just leave it on for days. She'd be performing and then she'd just sort of collapse into bed at the end of the night after a performance, complete with makeup, and just add more the next day.
In the spring of 1966, Dusty discovered a pop song in the most unlikely of places, but it was to become her signature song.
It was an Italian song which Dusty had heard at the San Remo Music Festival.
Io che non vivo più d'un'ora senza te. When I heard that, and the audience stood up in the middle at San Remo, I just said, that's it, that's the song. And I sat in it for a year, praying that no one else would do it. Meanwhile, sort of tucking the record under the couch.
And every time she was recording, she'd say, I must write lyrics to this, I must record it. And one year she said, I must write lyrics to this, I must record it, but I'm recording tomorrow. I, like an idiot, said, any fool can write lyrics. So she said, well, if you're so cocky about that, you go and write lyrics.
So, drafting in her friend, Simon Napier Bell, Vicky did just that.
We had the Italian song, and I said to him, do you know any Italian? He said, no, do you? No. Okay, then we'll have to start from scratch. So we came up with the title, which we both were quite chuffed about, and thought, you don't have to say you love me. That's sort of quite us, and we like that. And we wrote the lyrics. And the next morning, I typed them up, and I called Simon, and I said, these are rubbish. And he said, I know. He said, but what are you going to do? She needs it this morning. And I said, oh, God, I'm so embarrassed. So I gave it to Dust, and she said, these are rubbish. I know. So she said, well, I'll have to do it. She recorded it. Of course, it went to number one. And she said, these are rubbish, but I'm delighted it went to number one.
When I said I needed you, you said you would always stay. It wasn't me who changed, but you. And now you've gone away. Don't you see that now you've gone, and I'm left here on my own, that I have to follow you and beg you to come home. You don't have to say you love me, just be close at hand. You don't have to stay forever, I will understand. Believe me, I can't help but love you. But believe me, I'll never tie you down. Left alone with just a memory, life seems dead and so unreal. All that's left is loneliness. There's nothing left to feel. You don't have to say you love me, just be close at hand. You don't have to stay forever, I will understand. Believe me,
You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, a truly massive hit with 2 million sales worldwide. By the mid-60s, Dusty's profile was such that songwriters were all desperate to pitch her their material.
What Dusty did was take their songs and just create something transcendent. And I think if you're a songwriter, that's the ultimate accolade.
But the song she wanted to record next was one the writer was less than eager to hand over.
Dusty was a bit of a muse for Carole King because her voice perfectly fitted Carole King's songs.
I had met her prior to that, and I always remember praising her, and she blushed. She was just so shy. But I knew, as time went by, that she was fiercely possessive of going back. She wanted to do it herself, and she let me do it.
And when Carole King first heard Going Back, Dusty's version, she was moved to tears.
It was the ultimate accolade from someone who wanted to do it herself, and to praise me for doing it and liking it. I just thought, I've never felt happier. I burst into tears.
I think I'm going back to the things I learned so well in my youth. I think I'm returning
Despite her shyness, those that knew Dusty knew that she usually got what she wanted, which was pretty unusual for a female artist at that time. Here's Lulu.
She was absolutely sure about what she wanted, the sound she wanted, and how she was going to do it before really girls got into that area. She handpicked the songs, and I have had a lot of trouble with that. I'd find myself begging and crying with producers to let me record certain songs that I liked, and I was very often overruled, and I would accept that because I thought they knew better. But really, that's not what Dusty did. So Dusty paved the way. She opened the gates.
And once Dusty heard a song she liked, even if it was meant for another artist, she was going to do her best to get it.
Dusty always exercised real quality control when she chose her songs. She knew exactly what she wanted. I Close My Eyes and Count to 10, which is one of the best songs she's recorded. It was written by Clive Westlake, the singer, and when I was interviewing him for the book, he told me a little story about how I Close My Eyes and Count to 10, he'd offered it to Dusty's manager, Vic Billings, and Vic apparently was keeping it in secret for Kiki D. But Dusty got to hear it, and immediately she got on the phone to Clive and said, "That's it, I'm going to have that song, that's amazing, I want that one." And that's it, Dusty got what she wanted.
It isn't the way that you look, and it isn't the way that you talk. It isn't the things that you say or do make me want you so. It has nothing to do with the wine or the music that's flooding my mind. But never before have I been so sure you're the someone I dreamed I would find. It's the way you make me feel the moment I am close to you. It's a feeling so unreal, somehow I can't believe it's true. The pounding I feel in my heart, the hoping that we'll never part. I can't believe this is really happening to me. I close my eyes and count to 10, and when I open them, you're still here. I close my eyes and count again. I can't believe it, but you're still here.
Dusty's determination didn't just stop at the material she recorded. Making her solo debut in the US at the Basin Street East Club in New York, and backed by jazz drummer Buddy Rich's band, she was unhappy with the sign outside the club, which gave top billing to Buddy Rich. So she found a ladder, climbed up, and altered the sign herself. According to legend, Buddy Rich was so incensed by this he went berserk and shouted a volley of obscene abuse at Dusty. She replied with a punch in the face. Early in 1967, Dusty was once more in the studio with Burt Bacharach, this time to work on the soundtrack of the spoof James Bond movie Casino Royale.
The song, Look of Love, is a theme song that came out of my scoring the picture Casino Royale. So it was really like instrumental information that was going to go into a song, but it first of all had to service the picture, a certain situation in the picture, and it had to also be the theme for one of the characters in there. It was played by Ursula Andress. So it was a very sexy thing.
The look of love is in your eyes. The look your heart can't disguise. The look of love is saying so much more than just words could
But by 1968, Dusty was very much aware that her time could soon be up in the fickle pop business. And not wanting to slip quietly onto the cabaret and dinner club circuit, she took the substantial and very brave move to Memphis, a city she saw as being more open-minded and more oriented to black music than London.
She was in an awkward position in Britain because really show business at that time, if you were approaching 30, you were sort of hived off into doing pantomimes or cabaret or nightclub dates, and that wasn't really her, and she was still interested in exploring and really experimenting, and I think she felt that America would be the place for her to go.
It was time. I'd done about everything there was to do for me to do, and I couldn't see myself progressing in any way.
The move paid off artistically. The resulting album, Dusty in Memphis, was hailed by the New York Times as a holy grail of pop singing, and these days is still a favorite with critics and fans alike. Not that the recording process there was easy.
The choice of songs, again, was absolutely brilliant, which was between Jerry and Dusty. I mean, Jerry came up with hundreds of songs and Dusty selected which she wanted to do.
We were waiting in albums and acetates and tapes. And out of the 100, Dusty gave approval to exactly none.
Just a little loving early in the morning beats a cup of coffee for starting off the day. Just a little loving when the world is yawning makes you wake up feeling good things are coming your way. This whole world wouldn't be half as bad, it wouldn't be half as sad if each and everybody in it had just a little loving early in the morning, that little extra something to kind of see them through. Nothing turns the day on, really gets it dawning, like a little bit of loving from some loving someone like you. This whole world wouldn't be half as bad, it wouldn't be half as sad if each and everybody in it had just a little loving early in the morning.
You know, I was just an English singer, and it was an enormous, I felt, a responsibility, and I was very intimidated, but they were wonderful with me. Jerry's gone in print as saying I'm the most insecure singer he's ever come across, and at that time he was quite right, because they were telling stories and talking about Aretha, and I'm going, what am I doing on this label? Why are they recording me?
I don't think that's particularly, weird or strange, because the sensibility of an artist who's as fragile as Dusty is, to say yes even to one song is almost like a life commitment.
I had very bad laryngitis throughout that entire album, and the patience of Jerry Wexler and the quiet support and the unflappability. I mean, they probably wanted to kill me by the time it was over, but they never let me know that. And the professionalism of that, I will always be grateful. And they made a really good record out of it.
I felt they were meant for each other. Jerry Wexler is a white man who really has a black soul, just like Dusty. So I felt they could complement each other. That should have gone on until the day she died, that relationship.
I think it's her best record. At the time, it wasn't commercially successful, but it comes up in every top 100 in Rolling Stone, everybody's favourite lists.
I think she made some sensational records in England. I Close My Eyes and Count to 10 is one of my favourites. But when she went to record in America, and maybe the standard of engineering, there was greater clarity, the arrangements got better. I mean, Dusty in Memphis is my favourite record.
I think it's an interesting experiment. I mean, obviously it came at a time when her career had started to wane and she needed to rejuvenate the career, which she did with Son of a Preacher Man. Personally, I think it's fantastic.
It's not only her soul voice in that song, it's her poise. There you get both the influence of white pop music and soul music. It's like the perfect combination.
Billy Ray was the preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered around and started talking, Pastor Billy would take me walking. Out through the backyard we go walking. Then he looked into my eyes. Lord knows to my surprise, the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Yes, he was. Being good isn't always easy, no matter how hard I try. When he started sweet talking to me, he'd come and tell me everything is alright. He'd kiss and tell me everything's alright. Can I get away again tonight? The only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Lord, he was. Yes, he was. How well I remember the look was in his eyes, stealing kisses from me on the slide, taking time to make time, telling me that he's all mine, learning from each other's knowing, looking to see how much we've grown, and the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Oh, yes, he was. The only one who could ever reach me was the sweet-talking son of a preacher man.
Son of a Preacher Man, which enjoyed a new lease of life recently when it was included on the soundtrack to Quentin Tarantino's blockbuster movie Pulp Fiction. But despite the top 10 success of Son of a Preacher Man and the critical acclaim the Memphis album garnered, the follow-up singles, Am I the Same Girl and How Can I Be Sure, only just scraped into the charts. This was to be the last top 40 success for 17 years and would begin the bleakest spell of Dusty's career. In the early 70s, Dusty moved to Laurel Canyon, California, and adopted the life of a wealthy woman of leisure. Looking back, she says, I was sort of nouveau riche. The trouble was, I was not very nouveau and not very riche.
Early in the 70s, I sensed that they were beginning to have enough of me, and I was certainly beginning to have enough of the disenchantment I was feeling. You know, I didn't know what else I could do. I don't know, it's just that it wasn't stimulating anymore, and it wasn't fun anymore. We all became very serious and almost a drudgery.
She really didn't know where she was going. She didn't want to end up working the lounges in Vegas and doing that circuit, but not much else seemed available to her.
It wasn't easy for her. I think this led to her losing her confidence and spending more and more time partying, and she went on quite a downward spiral for a while and then just stopped recording.
I did get very depressed and very despondent. I mean, if you sit around and things are not going your way and you wonder really what the hell you should be doing, what else are you going to do?
And she went through a period of really drinking far too much, doing too many drugs. And when you do that, time goes very quickly, and suddenly a year's gone by, 2 years have gone by, 3 years have gone by, and, you know, you lose sense of time.
And before she knew it, 10 years had gone by since recording the Memphis album. In 1979, Dusty attempted a comeback with an album optimistically titled So It Begins Again. But unfortunately, it didn't. Dusty even recorded a single, Sometimes Like Butterflies, for Peter Stringfellow's new record label, Hippodrome. Dusty was keen to promote the new, more experienced, older her. But the industry just wanted the 60s icon, something which left her very frustrated.
I got offered those golden oldie things when things were very slow. And I couldn't do it because I knew I'd blow my bloody brains out. I knew that I didn't have the emotional capacity to always be looking back. It's not enough. This is what I was supposed to do. I thought of many other things, but I don't have training as anything else. I can't think of anything else I want to do.
Dusty always wanted to be contemporary. Dusty was never into doing a nostalgic trip. She never ever did that. She was never into, hey, remember those fabulous 60s? She always wanted to be now. She was always interested in current music, which is, I think, one of the things that made her such a good artist.
The Pet Shop Boys' Neil Tennant. But of course, that was a difficult part of being an icon. The icon tended to stay inert, forever frozen in time, and Dusty had very much moved on. But she was amused by a new phenomenon, other people's interpretations of the icon she'd become.
She loves when the drag queens do her better than her and goes, how do they do it? Their hair's better than mine. But she loves it. I mean, she thinks it's very campy, great fun.
There's a funny story of a gay pride march where there were about 20 gay men at the front of the march, all dressed up as Dusty Springfield.
But a return to form and the pop charts came with a duo who'd long been fans of Dusty's. It was Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe, the Pet Shop Boys, who escorted her back into the top 10 in 1987, a quarter of a century after her hits with the Springfields.
The Pet Shop Boys were totally responsible for getting her back in the business. Ali Willis, who was a friend of mine, had written a song with Neil Tennant and Chris and called me up and said, it's so perfect for Dusty. Do you know where to find her? And I said, yes, of course, send me the song. And it would be a great way to get her off her behind and do something. And I sent it to Dust and said,
well, here's today's silly idea. Think about this for half an hour, because she had sent me the tape, and I sort of looked at it and thought, I knew who they were. I couldn't see where I fit in it.
When we worked with her, she had another hit record for Yonks. And I guess she felt she was walking into a different era recording with us. She loved West End girls. She always said, I nearly crashed my car the first time I heard it on the radio, because she loved the sound of it.
And they were magnificent because they adored her and really, did see her as an icon, a star.
And I remember Chris and I, there was a little office in the studio we worked, and suddenly Dusty came in, and we were kind of giggling in the office thinking, oh my God, it's Dusty Springfield.
And she tried it several times, and she eventually said to Neil, what do you want from me? And he said, for you to sing. And she went, oh, it's that simple, I can do that.
They were so patient. I suppose they were a bit frightened I might blow up or something, They'd probably heard I was temperamental or something, and I just went in and said, what do you want? And he said, the sound of your voice.
Because she had in her head that there was a whole, complicated ritual.
And I think she thought we were going to say, oh, have you heard Sade's new album? Or can you do Annie Lennox? And of course we wanted to sound like Dusty. It just sounded amazing the way, in the second chorus that she sings, she does that classic Dusty thing of twisting the melody up to a huge climax. The first time I heard that, I couldn't believe it.
You always wanted a lover, I only wanted a job, and I was worth both living. How am I gonna get through? How am I gonna get through? I come here looking for money, got to have it, and end up leaving with love. Oh, now you left me with nothing, can't take it. How am I gonna get through? How am I gonna get through?
I bought you drinks, I brought you flowers, I read your books and talked for hours. Every day so many drinks, such pretty flowers. So tell me, what have I done to deserve this? What have I done to deserve this? What have I?
Since you went away, I've been hanging around. I've been wondering why. I'm feeling down. You went away. Could you make me better? I don't know how I'm gonna get through. How I'm gonna get through. How I'm gonna get through. How I'm gonna get
The Pet Shop Boys with Dusty Springfield and What Have I Done to Deserve This? Another hit came by the Pet Shop Boys a couple of years later with a song written for the film Scandal, a movie about the Profumo affair, which, like Dusty, was a 60s zeitgeist, enjoying renewed interest in the late 80s.
I'd already written a lyric about the Profumo affair, believe it or not, years and years previously in the 1970s, and so I took it out. And of course, this Profumo scandal film was set in the early 60s. The year Dusty went solo, 1963. I think Dusty met Christine Keeler, actually. Anyway, so we did it. She's got a cup of coffee and a cigarette and the words. But it was great. If you listen to the way she sings it, she really gets lyric over beautifully.
In 1995, Dusty returned to Nashville to record the album A Very Fine Love, an ambition she'd had since recording there some 25 years earlier with the Springfields. But during the recording, she was finding it harder and harder to work and was suffering from a mystery illness. The illness was diagnosed as cancer, and Dusty underwent a year's chemotherapy and enjoyed a brief remission. But in 1998, the disease was back. Despite all of this, she never once lost her sense of humour.
There's also a lovely story when she wasn't well some time ago and had to go up to the hospital and was being picked up to go home by a friend of hers, Lee Everett Olkin. So Lee went to pick her up in an ambulance because it just seemed much easier than putting her in a car. And the ambulance was instructed by Dusty to stop on the Fulham Road so that she could go to Divertimenti. So the ambulance driver is saying, we cannot just stop on the pavement. And Dusty said, well, of course you can. You're an ambulance. You can stop anywhere. And jumps out, runs across the road, nearly getting hit by a bus into the ambulance driver is saying to Lee, you've got to go and get her. We're not allowed to let the patient out of our sight, and we cannot stop on the Fulham Road. So Lee goes and says to the shop girl, I'm sorry, you've got to hurry up. We've got an ambulance waiting.
But Dusty finally succumbed to the disease and died at peace in her sleep. She leaves behind her beloved cats, a catalogue of wonderful music, and many, many sad fans.
Dusty's funeral felt like a big event as well, because the people outside and the centre of Henley where the church was all shut off. It was a very moving event, I must say. It really felt, I know it's a cliche, but it really felt like the end of an era.
When they played Going Back, at the end of the ceremony, I thought I'd just dissolve into a pool of tears.
Suddenly the church went silent, and those piano chords echoed out across the church. And it was so moving at that moment because it seemed written for that situation. It was really one of the most moving moments of my life.